Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how I put the hinges on my MDF panel doors, and I'm also going to give you a quick rundown what I think are the best hinges for use on MDF doors, with a particular focus on what hinges I think are the easiest to fit, the most accessible for DIYers like you guys and myself. Now, the focus of today's video is very much on MDF because that's what these doors that I've made here are, but whatever wardrobe, cupboard doors you're making, the hinges that I'm recommending in today's video will apply, whether they're MDF, natural wood or otherwise. Now, there is a bewildering array of hinges on the market, and the hinge that you choose is going to depend on the type of door you've got, how you want that door to open and close, the type of frame you've got. For example, is your door going to be inset into the frame like this, or overlaid on top of the frame, because that determines the type of hinge you're going to choose. And finally, ease of installation. But for the purpose of today's video, and particularly if you're looking to install hinges on an MDF panel door or otherwise, I'm going to concentrate on three different types of hinge. The butt hinge, which is the most commonly installed hinge, the flush hinge, and finally the concealed or Euro style hinge. Now, I've built quite a few cupboards, wardrobes over the years since we moved into this cottage. I built a cupboard in our utility room for the washing machine and tumble dryer and a bit of storage. I built cupboards in the bathroom to go around the boiler. Wardrobes in my son's bedroom. And finally, the panel doors that will feature in today's video in our spare room. Now, all these wardrobes or cupboard doors featured one particular hinge, the flush hinge. And I use this hinge because it's really easy hinge for DIYers to use. It's good for lightweight doors such as kitchen cabinets, wardrobes, cupboard doors, and crucially for us DIYers, it doesn't have to be recessed or mortised into the door. So these little hinges can be laid flat onto the door surface. And what I mean by that, if you look at these butt hinges, which you very typically see on most internal doors, the hinge itself is set into the door frame, and you would have seen my recent video, which is a link to which is coming up on the screen now, where I showed you how I recessed those into the door and into the frame. So, flush hinges are brilliant, and the answer to all DIYers' prayers? Not quite. There is one big drawback. Typically with flush hinges, as you'll see on these kitchen doors, which I didn't make, you have a slight bevel, as you can see here, both on the outside edge, but also on the hinge edge. Without the bevel on the inside hinge edge, what you sometimes find is that the door doesn't quite shut properly because the screws on each part of the hinge are sort of imprinting in the corresponding part of the frame. Maybe because, like here, the screws are actually not flush with the hinge itself. Well, just get small screws, I hear you say. Well, it's not that simple because not all flush hinges are created equal. You look here, this one has nice deep countersunk holes which will accept and properly recess a 3mm diameter screw like this. But this cheaper flush hinge has hardly any countersink at all. Even this really good quality ball bearing flush hinge that I'm going to be showing you in today's video does have a countersink, but it's not massive. And that screw is not completely flush with the surface of the hinge. So the upshot of all that, my friends, is if you don't bevel the edge of the door when you're using flush hinges, this is what can happen. That is where the door should be shutting to, and you can see how far out it is. But take away the offending hinge where the screws aren't recessed properly, and now the door shuts properly. So if you decide at the end of today's video that flush hinges are still your preferred option, make sure you buy hinges like this that are good quality and have a nice deep countersink on the plate itself. And to help you with this, I'll post a link in the description at the end of this video to one of these hinges. Before we move on, I've got two more slight issues with the flush hinge. First one is there's no soft close mechanism incorporated into the hinge, obviously. So to get the doors to shut properly, ideally you need some sort of magnet on the frame itself and a corresponding plate for the magnet on the door. so that when you shut the door, it stays shut. But the other issue with flush hinges is that there is no adjustment once you've screwed the hinge onto the door and onto the frame. So you have to get the positioning of the hinge on the frame itself and the door absolutely spot on. That is why a year or so ago I thought it's high time I experimented with these concealed European style hinges. Now, a lot of you will probably have seen my video on how to install European concealed hinges, and a link to that is coming up on the screen now. These are the doors where I installed these hinges, and you'll see here there's a soft close element to them, so they just slowly shut on their own accord, and you don't need the magnets because the hinge powers itself shut. Now, if you've been put off installing these hinges because you think it's too complicated, check out my video because it really isn't. And the beauty of these hinges, as you'll see in the video, is they are adjustable in 3 separate ways, which is a massive plus if you're trying to fine-tune the position of the doors once you've installed them. So why didn't I install European style hinges on these doors, I hear you ask? Well, there's a very good reason for that. I didn't think I could because of the way that my door is sort of set into this door frame. This is an exact mock-up that I've prepared for this video of the actual door frame itself. And then whilst I was doing this video, I thought, you stupid idiot, of course you can use European style hinges on this frame, because all this is an overlay application rather than the inset application that you saw on the European style hinge doors that I just showed you in the video. A really helpful summary of which you see on the relevant page of the Ironmongery Direct catalogue, which I use to buy a lot of my hardware. So whilst it was too late to fit these hinges to my new doors, because I'd already fitted the flush hinges, I thought I'd buy a set of these hinges, show you how easy it is to buy them and how they work for the purposes of this video. So everything for me when I'm buying concealed hinges starts at this Blum PDF. Again, look at my how to measure and install concealed hinges video for a full rundown of how this works, but I'll show you very quickly. It's a great little PDF, this, because it shows you how many hinges to put on your door depending on the size of the door. And then going to page, just concentrating on this page here, this is what I want, because I want my doors to open by 95 degrees. I've got a thick door, which is a door up to 30 millimeters. Remember, I've got my MDF panels are made from 2 12mm panels. We know my door is an overlay application. So looking at this visual here, the overlay on my doors is about 11 millimeters. So H here, this is the mounting plate height. There are 2 mounting plates readily available, the sort of 0, which is the sort of standard plate height, and 3 millimeters. And I'm going to go for this one here because it delivers me a minimum of 11 millimeters overlay. So that tells me what bracket I need, which is the clip top Blue Motion 95 degree thick door. Now, further down in the document, you've got a list of all the mounting plates that you can get for the European style hinges. And this is the mounting plate that I tend to use here. And I like this mounting plate because it has a screw on it which you can adjust to adjust the height of the door. Some of the cheaper mounting plates do not have this. I like to have a brochure in front of me because it's easier to browse and you can get the codes you need to buy online. This is the 90 degree hinge I need here, showing the overlay application. And then a couple of pages on, you've got the mounting plates. And then this is the one we need here, the 3 millimeter spacing. And here we are, the hinges have arrived. And the mounting plates. If you're not familiar with these hinges, the mounting plate clicks on like that. Okay, a couple of things to point out here. Look at the difference between this inset door hinge that I use on my daughter's cupboards and this hinge that we've ordered today, which is for the overlay application. The other point to make is the mounting plates on the inset hinge were just the standard 0 height, whereas these, if you remember, are the slightly higher 3mm plates. And you can clearly see there the difference in the height of those two mounting plates. Why do I need them to be higher? Because my overlay is only 12mm, whereas typically you're overlaying the door a lot more than that. So I need a chunkier mounting plate to take the bracket further away from the frame so that the door closes onto this rather narrow overlay. Now what I've got to do is attach these to the door so we can show you how they work. And I told you about the beauty of these hinges being that you could adjust them. Look at here how just with a couple of turns of a screw you can drastically alter the position of the door relative to the frame that it's attached to. The reason that I go for these slightly more expensive mounting plates is that they have this vertical adjustment that the cheaper plates don't. And there you have it. The mock-up door is constructed, and you see how the soft close works. So guys, where am I going with this? Well, when I started this video, all I was intending to do was to tell you all about these flush hinges that I've used so much in the house and I've used on my new doors. But in the process of doing the video, it reminded me just how good these Euro style hinges are. So let's just have a quick recap of the pros and cons of each. So the advantage of the flush hinges is they don't need rebating and they're pretty easy to fit. But the disadvantages actually outweigh the advantages. Whilst they don't need rebating, you do often need to bevel the side of the door unless you're lucky enough to have bought good quality flush hinges that have a really good countersink in them. Also, they can't be adjusted, so you've got to get your doors bang on, otherwise you're going to end up having to adjust or alter the door if it doesn't fit into the frame. And the last point, which I will touch on in a bit when I show you how I fitted these hinges, is that they're not quite as strong fitting because you're screwing into the end grain of the MDF if you're using them on MDF panel doors. Concealed hinges, on the other hand, paint a very different picture. The more expensive ones have a soft close mechanism which can be switched off if you don't want to use it. They're also easy to install once you get your head around which hinges you need and apply a couple of basic steps about where to drill the holes. And finally, they provide a really strong, secure fixing onto the door. What do I mean by that? Well, it's this. When you're installing a concealed hinge in your door, in your MDF door, you're screwing into the face of the MDF, which is a lot stronger than the fixing you get for your flush hinges, which is screwed into the end grain of the MDF. That said, I've made almost all the doors in my house with this method of screwing into the end grain, and none of the doors have failed me yet. They're still going strong. So don't listen to those YouTubers out there who run their own pro workshops who try and argue that us DIYers shouldn't be making doors with panels like this, we should be making them with loose tenons. Quite frankly, that's rubbish, because they argue that these glue joints get weakened when you put a screw into them. It just doesn't wash with me. It hasn't happened in my case, and I'll be showing you today a really good way to do this. But even so, it's not as strong a fixing screwing into the end grain of the MDF as it is screwing into the face. The only downside of these concealed hinges is these particular ones, and they do different prices depending on whether you want to go with the soft close mechanism. These are Blum, which are one of the market leaders. You can get cheaper concealed hinges, but these Blum hinges with the soft close, including the base plate, which again is a more expensive base plate because it incorporates the vertical adjustment on it. These are £13.44 a pair, compared with £5.76 a pair for the flush hinges. Now, I know this seems like a lot of money, but it isn't when you think that you've saved yourselves hundreds, possibly thousands of pounds in making these wardrobes or cupboards yourself. And so it's well worth the investment for what is a quality piece of kit. But fellow DIYers, I want to urge you from watching this video to start using concealed hinges, because once you've fitted them once, you'll realise just how easy they are to install and what a far superior product they are to the flush hinge, just because of the way they operate and the amount of adjustments that you can make to them to fine-tune the position and the operation of your doors. Remember to check out my full video on measuring and installing European style concealed hinges, and there's a handy Rockler cheat sheet coming up here now, which I will also include in the description at the end of the video, and I'll also post a link to the Blum PDF at the end of the video as well. With all that out of the way, I'm going to finish off this video by showing those of you who still want to use flush hinges the best way to fit them to your MDF panel doors. Okay, so I'm going to rattle through this as quickly as I can because I know we're already at 16 minutes in this video. So as I explained, whereas I previously used the flush hinge like this, recently I decided to upgrade. I saw these on DIYte. These are a bull race flush hinge. I've never seen them before, but basically it's a flush hinge that has a ball bearing inside of it. The slight downside of it is the countersink on the plate, as I was just describing earlier on, isn't great. So if you are going to use these, I would advise you to slightly bevel your doors, unless you can find a screw that's small enough to fit flush with the surface. So next question, how many hinges should you put on the door? Well, particularly if you're working with MDF, my rule of thumb is you cannot overdo the number of hinges on the door, because what the hinges do is they support the door and prevent it from warping. If you look here on my daughter's bedroom, I put 4 hinges up and down the door, and to the left of the picture you'll see a little visual from the Blum PDF from yesterday, which gives you recommendations, albeit those are based on concealed hinges rather than flush hinges or butt hinges, but a good rule of thumb nonetheless. So the next question that there is a massive amount of opinion on is, how far from the top and from the bottom of the door should you position your hinge? There's so much opinion on this. I asked a professional carpenter when I was on site in my day job recently, and he said 6 inches from the top, 8 inches from the bottom. But the general rule of thumb, which is what I've done on my doors, as you can see in the image here, is to position the hinge 6 inches from the top and 9 inches from the bottom, with another hinge in the midpoint between those two hinges. Why is the bottom hinge further away from the bottom than the top hinge? Well, again, there's a lot of opinion on this. Some people say it's to carry the weight better, but my view is it's purely an aesthetic thing. When you look down at an angle to the floor, if the hinge at the bottom is the same spacing away from the edge of the door as the top hinge, it would look far too close to the bottom. So my advice to you for your doors is don't necessarily go with the 6 and 9 inch, because your door height might make that look out of proportion. Position your top hinge maybe 6 inches from the top, and then position the bottom hinge in such a place that when you look down at the bottom of the door, it looks like it's the same distance from the edge of the door as the top. That's what I do personally. Okay, and now a quick run through on how I attach the hinges to the actual door itself. Step 1, mark the position of the hinge. Notice the proximity of the hole to the join of my 2 pieces of 12mm MDF. I'm not worried about that because I've glued them well together, and the screw isn't going into the join, it's going next to the join. Now, gently mark exactly the centre of each hole with a bradawl. Next crucial point, pick the right screws. These are 3mm by 25mm. Golden rule when screwing into MDF end grain, you've got to use screws with a thin thread so that you don't split the wood. Next golden rule, pick the right drill bit. This drill here is a 2mm diameter drill bit. It's the same diameter as the spine of the screw, excluding the thread. That is your golden rule for drilling into MDF. Next, drill the pilot hole. And finally, insert your 3 screws. Careful not to over tighten them. And there we go, it was that simple. Now looking at this, you can see there isn't one tiny crack on the MDF, which is the evidence always that either you've got the drill diameter too small, or you haven't drilled a pilot hole at all, or your screws are too fat. That is a really strong fitting, and I'm not at all worried about those screws ever coming out. And fast forwarding a few days, I'm now here screwing on the hinges to the fully painted door. So I haven't actually gone through the process of showing you how I then hung the door to the frame, because I was really wanting to get across in this video how to choose hinges rather than the sort of finished process itself. Have a look at my recent video on installing butt hinges, a link to which is coming up on the screen now. That shows you the process to go through. If any of you still want to see how I actually hung these doors, then please leave me a comment in the comment section below and I'll try and fit that in to a new video soon. So that's it everyone, I'm sorry you've had to sit through a very long video again today. Just a quick reminder, open up the description at the end of the video and there will be links to all the sources that I've used in today's video. So I urge you, get on the bandwagon and start using concealed hinges because you won't regret it. So I hope you found today's video useful. If you have liked the video, please click on the like button below, and please, if you're new to my channel, I'd love to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here.